All right. Noting the hour in the presence of quorum, I call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. First up are citizens' concerns. Would anyone in the audience like to voice concerns? If you do want to, please come up to this podium and push the button for the microphone. Seeing no one coming up, would like to move on to our first item, which is a discussion of the dog park portion of the CPC funding article. Please come. And hold on.
Good evening. My name is Tom Gillespie. I'm the current chairperson of the Acton Dog Park Committee, and I have a few slides for tonight.
I'm sorry, I'm working on that.
That's okay.
I think I need to log out of Zoom.
I think you just need to be elevated.
Yeah. I'm sorry about this.
No worries, no worries. All right, there we go. Thank you, Christy. All right. And so there were a few emails going around about one of the CPC items for this year, namely the 100K request from the dog park. And so I'm here to give you some more numbers, answer any questions, and provide as little or as much information as you need about this project. So if you go on to the next slide. Very quickly, the history over the 7 years that this project has been going on includes establishment by the select board, number of forums and surveys to gather what the requirements were, going through a process of selecting available municipal properties, and then through recent years securing a design grant from a foundation that you will hear several times tonight, the Stanton Foundation. The design grant, which completely covered the design work, allowed us to go on and complete essentially a 90% design. And with that came a series of cost estimates, which were then required to feed into a grant application to, again, the Stanton Foundation for a $225 maximum construction grant, which has a town match requirement of 10%. So that 25K, the 10% town match, was secured at a previous town meeting in 2021. Questions, history, etc. Okay, so this is a quick overview of the current design. The dog park is on the left-hand side, the triangular piece. This is on Route 27 Main Street, somewhat across and down a bit from the public safety facility building, right next door to the former Kennedy property, and also the site of the Acton Housing Authority new project, McManus Manor, which would be off and up to the right. You'll see some preliminary drawings for a park on the left-hand side. There's been energy around locating what's called a senior park in that portion of the land there. There's been some joint activities around making sure that designs were compatible and even a comprehensive stormwater management plan for both properties. But the dog park will be what you see on the left-hand side in that black square box, featuring both a smaller dog and also an all dog area. A little bit of parking. We've researched parking very carefully and feel that the approximately 16 spaces there with some handicap spaces will be sufficient for this size dog park and for the population. And then a couple of pictures which are harder to see about various facets going into that. The goal was to produce an attractive park, landscaping, a sort of nature trail around the outside, boarding around, and then connecting up to the senior park. All right. So where are we today? The benefits have been discussed and pretty well documented, et cetera. We do feel that there is strong town select board and leadership and citizen support that we've clarified and dug into over the previous 7 years. We do have a final design. And a final design that's in place was assuming or is assuming that the town sewer extension project will happen. Although if that does not happen, there are some alternatives that we've researched already, and that would not be, we feel, a deal breaker at this point. And I mentioned the integration with the entire Main Street campus. Various town committees have taken a look at this, have provided some wonderful input, and been very helpful as we put this together. I'll call it shovel-ready. We don't have a bid yet, but we are virtually ready to go out to a bid, but needing to wait for the sewer extension project to sort of finalize, but that's a whole different topic. We would be ready and hopefully doing some construction starting this year, late summer. We'll have to see, again, how things line up for that. All right, next slide, starting to get into the numbers. So if you take a look at the current funding sources, and happy, again, to answer any questions associated with this. I mentioned the design grant that we got from the Stanton Foundation, completely covering the design costs, and that's been expended. And the town match for the construction grant is already set and in place. And so the primary source of funding is that $225K coming from the Stanton Foundation for construction of the dog park. However, a couple things to note about that particular grant. It was awarded a few years ago. It's a grant that has been in place at that same amount at multiple neighboring towns and projects for many years. And so that's reflective of what was typical amounts for dog parks over the past perhaps decade or so, but it has not been updated or modified in any way. And we're at this point having been granted the construction monies, which is great, but we have to have bids in by the end of April next year, or Stanton Foundation has indicated that, well, you just didn't get it done in time, and we're going to find someone else to give the money to. The Friends of the Acton Community Dog Park has been established for a number of years, really working hard organization, raising some of the numbers that you've seen already with a balance of $10K, and then as we get closer to having bids and actually being able to put shovels in the ground, they feel that they can bring on board another $30K through fundraising of various forms. And so hopefully you can read all this. The final amount of funds available is around $290K to be leveraged for the construction. There's also an ongoing maintenance amount of approximately $4K per year coming from the increase in dog licenses that happened several town meetings ago. But that's going to be definitely eaten up yearly through maintenance fees, et cetera. Next slide goes over the cost estimates, where we are thinking today. So we did that estimate of probable costs for the the construction grant application back in '21. It was a 90% design. It was a comprehensive cost estimate that included prevailing wages and material costs at the time. There was no cost estimate included for stormwater management simply because we didn't realize that we needed one at that point, but we know we do now. And so the design really focused on what we were calling a minimum to get a functioning and suitably attractive dog park up and running. There's still a number of elements that might be added over the years, but this is sort of the things to get it all going. And really the estimate at that time would leverage all of that $250K Stanton grant and including the town match. So that was, looked to be a pretty doable, even level funding between costs and sources of income or sources of funds at that point. And then the private fundraising would bring on additional furnished by other FBO items, such as benches, et cetera, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the next slide brings you to updates onto that 100K CPA application that we made. One of the key drivers of that, frankly, is just the recent construction bid costs have proven themselves to be higher. That's proven in multiple recent town projects. Prevailing wages have gone up, material costs have skyrocketed, and while we don't have any bids in hand, we really feel that the original balance between funds available and estimate of costs has really shifted, where the funds available have been pretty much staying the same, and the costs just keep going up and up. And so it was time to bolster the whole project's equations by seeking some additional funding. That Stanton grant, as I mentioned, was fixed to $225K. We had the stormwater management costs that were originally not included in that estimate of costs. And then some additional feedback from various town committees around accessibility and a few other items have led to a number of items that we've added in, and I've got some details of that on the next page. So if you break down the CPA request, the construction estimates that we feel at this point, including a 15% contingency, is about $332K. The items that we've gotten feedback on in terms of accessibility, water, and benches, and these are mostly items that we plan to purchase ourselves, not through the contractor to save markups, et cetera, through contractors, but still a number of items that are, again, associated with getting a dog park up and running is about $58K. So that brings the total current estimate to around $390. The funds available are about $290 between the things I've already mentioned, and that's what left us with a $100K grant going through a CPA application. No questions? Okay. The next slide is a quick breakdown of some of those items that we hope to purchase ourselves, came from feedback, and was that $58K amount that you saw as part of the component of the overall $100K ask. What happens if we don't get this $100K funding? I think at the top, on the next slide, I think at the top of the list is the fact that we're not going to be able to do a dog park without this funding. That level balance is just so far out that we really do need that additional funding in order to make this an ongoing viable project. So if we don't build a dog park there, what is the town going to do with those properties? They have a long storied history, but they're still a bit of an eyesore, and in a key location in the town, sort of nice to have all this going on with Kelly's Corner, but then just down the street having these big, slightly eyesore properties. And it's likely that the costs of doing something with that would probably be falling on the town at some point. I've mentioned the realities of the construction costs. We look at it as, without the $100K, that would be a 25% reduction in the overall project funding, and we just don't see how we're going to close that gap. We'd be compromising a stated goal of the select board to figure out and bring on board an attractive dog park located at that location. This has been a specific select board goal for a number of previous years, and we'd be walking away from that. And I do think there would be public dissatisfaction. There's a lot of support, again, for it. The needs come down to people that have, for various reasons, animals that are not able to be off-leash in the open areas that we do have in Acton. A lot of people enjoy those open areas, and the dogs are able to take advantage of that, which is awesome and great. But this features a fenced-in area where dogs can be safely off-leash for their owners based upon their temperament, et cetera. And so that brings me to the last Q&A slide.
Thank you. Who has questions, comments?
Sorry.
Dave?
You know, the grant, just if I could repeat what I think you said, was it was awarded in 2023, and if it's not used by April 2025, it'll be forfeit?
Correct.
Okay. I'm just more of a curiosity, but, you know, when the town approved the $25,000 in 21, was that just like the application period from 21 to 23? Because I have noticed that property's been unused for quite a while now at this point.
So I don't think I fully understand the question.
Just when the town approved the 25K, I mean, what was the lag there just between the town approving the 25K, if that is related at all to the Stanton grant?
It is related.
Okay.
The Stanton grant requires that the town commit to a
10%
match, a
match.
10%
Yeah.
match. So we had to work that through, and include that in a previous budget, go through town meeting to get that 25K set, and only then could we go to Stanton with the design and apply for the construction grant for the remainder of the money.
Okay, so that's when town meeting 21, the clock started, when that approval was given.
Yeah, there was still probably another year by the time we got the final design work done, prepared the materials, et cetera, and actually made the application to Stanton. One of the things that affected that time period was the sewer issue, where the Housing Authority was originally planning on using the dog park property as a leach field for the septic system.
I see.
And so we had to
Right.
sort of continue those discussions and figure out, and then the sewer extension project came into being, and so we adjusted. So some of that gap is just natural figuring out with neighboring things happening.
Sure. And then maybe just on the, I think the drainage, you said was the new piece, the stormwater part of it?
Yes.
I'm sorry if I missed it in the material, but
No,
can you
that's
just outline what that additional cost is now?
Sure. So the design costs for that were about 10K, and we've done some rough estimates for the increase in the construction costs associated with the stormwater management that would need to be put into place into the dog park that also allows for a future senior park with some impervious spaces, et cetera. So we didn't want to just focus completely on the dog park because the select board wanted the two properties to be able to work together. A master plan was developed, et cetera. So it was hard to estimate, but we think the additional construction costs of the stormwater management components is probably 30 to 40K above the original estimates.
And is it just to, I apologize for really oversimplifying.
No, that's okay.
You know, going from 2021 to 2024, it sounds like most of this 100,000 incremental is just the inflation really based around the original project plus the stormwater?
That's a fair statement, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, and just for background, I was one of the folks who asked to hold this up because I think I remember it was you in 21 we had brought this forward to us, and I'd asked at the time about the 25,000,
Sure.
saying, is this it? You know, sometimes there's more money that everybody says this is sort of a one and
Sure.
done, we're done with this. And that was my hang up with the 100,000 was,
Sure.
okay, well,
What's changed?
what's changed?
Yeah.
And to be fair, some things change, but I always like everyone to be aware of that. And I think we all need to be aware that,
Sure.
you know, 25,000. As far as I know right now, I think that should be it. But, you know, if this goes on,
Right, and at that point, the reason I gave that answer was we felt that the combination of the Stanton funding with the town match plus the fundraising was pretty close to what we felt we needed to bring this thing online, to the extent that you have estimated costs, et cetera. That, the difference was small enough that we could figure it out, we could make it happen. But since that happened a couple of years ago, the construction costs have gone up, and we discovered that, yes, some stormwater management needs to be done. And we got a little bit of feedback from other town committees in terms of, well, you really need to bring some of these other things online. We would like the water facilities to be better than just a spigot stuck in the ground sort of thing. And all of those things combined brought us to that 100K figure.
and is there any wiggle room in that? I mean, I'm not asking like, can it be cut, but like, what happens if this doesn't start getting built till spring of 25? And then
Sure.
we're-
Yeah, I mean, as with any CPA project, if we end up not using it all, it goes back to the CPA. So, and we're going to use the private fundraising up first, the Stanton grant up first. And so if we get some really wonderful bids and everything else, the amount that we actually need to cover the gap from the CPA funds would actually be reduced and would just go back into that pot.
Okay, thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, so if you were to break the 100,
Thank you, sorry, I beg your
that's all right.
pardon.
I was looking down, I didn't see her either. So if you were to break the $100,000 down into what changed, 30 to 40 was stormwater management, which was not anticipated. There's another piece that's inflation, and there's another piece that is, for want of a better term, bells and whistles, things that you didn't have in the original design that you now have.
Yeah, I would humbly suggest that a bunch of those were associated with accessibility input. So people that are using it need benches to be able to sit, et cetera. So, but
Whatever
that's
term.
a fair characterization.
Whatever
yes.
term we want to apply, and you can
Yes.
use your own. How much of the 100,000 is in inflation and how much is in accessibility things?
So we would have to look at it to see if the accessibility things were really trimmed back, et cetera, because it was a set of recommendations. They sort of all go together. We'd have to look at how we break those apart and prioritize some things, et cetera. A good portion of the Friends fundraising will be helping towards those things, et cetera. So I guess I don't have a really crisp answer for you.
Well, my concern is that you don't have bids. And 100,000 may not be enough. So I was trying to get a sense of how much you've allowed for inflation, because I know if you don't spend it, the money goes back to the fund for the
Right.
CPA. But if you go over,
Sure.
what's the plan?
So here's my thinking on that. First of all, the original estimate of probable cost did have a 15% contingency built in. So we've kept a contingency in there, even though it's tempting to just cut that out, right? The guy who put that cost estimate together is our landscape designer, Dennis Dale, and he is very knowledgeable and has many contacts amongst the industry. And so he didn't just, pick a number and put it in there. He actually went and talked to a lot of people in terms of those being real prevailing wage conservative costs. So I think if you were to apply whatever number you want to based upon recent bids, a 10%, a 20% factor, that probably would still be in the ballpark. So I feel like we have a pretty good number from our original estimate, and adding what you might typically think is an increase in those costs still leaves that as a fairly solid number. I think that with the 100K, that equilibrium will again be close enough where we can make this happen.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, sorry, Jason. You're muted.
You mentioned briefly that there was a separate topic on not just stormwater, but sewerage. What kind of a potential wild card is that sewerage? And how big a wild card is that? Are you going to be back here in a year saying sewers did or didn't happen and therefore you need another 50 grand?
No, that's a great question. So I didn't want to take a lot of time going into that, but we started off assuming that the dog park was going to be built on top of a leach field. And so our designer did some preliminary designs that accommodated that. We went back with the AHA and had them modify a few things, because that's a tricky property. There's a lot of slopes involved in that property, right? And so we had to get those all worked out. And it was a good exercise, a good effort, wherein we were still able to accomplish a suitable leach field for the AHA septic system, but leaving enough space for still a reasonable sized dog park, et cetera. So all of the elements that went into that original design, what kind of fence, how much fencing, what kind of ground cover, plantings, the walk around the outside, the list goes on and on. Those can just sort of be lifted from the 90% design that we have and sort of plopped back down into the revised grade and design when there's going to be a septic field under the dog park. So the actual design, layout, parking lot location, all those things are pretty much the same between the two designs. The grading is different, et cetera. And that means that the costs are going to be relatively similar.
So when do you anticipate hearing back from the town on whether or not this is gonna happen? Because I can also foresee a situation where you're waiting for an answer, waiting for an answer, waiting for an answer, and then you either trip past the April 2025 deadline, or it's now been long enough period of time that inflation has bit you again.
Sure.
When are you going to say, we don't know what the town does on this, we need to move forward with it? Or what are you gonna say, or when are you gonna get when do you need an absolute firm commitment to make this happen so that you don't get disrupted?
There are a number of people in the audience that will make sure I get this right. But the last select board meeting where that was discussed indicated that there's a tremendous amount of pressure from the Housing Authority project to know, because they have a number of, they're further along in terms of ready to go out to bid. They have some financial commitments to make, et cetera. Bottom line, town manager has indicated that they're pushing hard to get an answer to whether the funding gap associated with the sewer extension project can be closed and how it's going to be closed by the end of May. If it goes
By
on.
the end of, did you say the end of May?
Correct. Go ahead, David.
Hi, the sewer extension was de-scoped slightly and went out to bid yesterday, I believe. And we'll know what responses we get in a matter of weeks, not months. So I'm not sure when the deadline is, but usually it's 3-4 weeks. So we'll know in that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
Roland?
Do we know if there's any rock ledge in there? Because I know when we went to build the schools, there was more rock ledge than what they thought was in there, and that could absolutely impact construction.
Yeah, great question. There's considerable rock ledge on that property. You can see a bunch of it sticking out. But fortunately, a dog park doesn't require you dig down. It's all really on the surface. And so our landscape architect is really on top of things like that, and he's expressed no concern about the minimal amount of sort of cutting that has to happen in terms of the soil, et cetera, running into surprises like a big rock ledge, et cetera.
Christine?
So, I mean, I'll be honest, I wasn't in favor of this dog park to begin with. This property has been the gift that keeps on taking.
Yeah.
We bought it
Yeah.
with taxpayer money and then sold it to ourselves with other taxpayer money at a loss. And now we're needing more taxpayer money to make the initiatives on the property take place at a time when we're incredibly budget strapped and seeking an override. I have a hard time voting in favor of expanded services and expanded maintenance projects that aren't absolutely necessary. So this one's a struggle for me.
Anyone else? Yeah, as you can imagine, it's, we are especially looking close at the budget. And,
Sure.
Because you had said previously, very honestly, that the expenses were going to be covered, it was,
Sure.
we thought, very important to understand
Yep.
why there was a need to come back.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a little stuck on this myself. Steve?
I could start the ball rolling if you wish, Madam Chair. I move that we recommend Article 9, Section K, I believe, dog park.
Second.
All right, discussion.
I would simply say in talking to my motion that I don't want to see us lose $225,000 in a grant and kill the project forever for the lack of $100,000.
Do we have any idea of what got thrown out at CPC? Because the CPC is a zero-sum game. Do we know what got thrown out to make room for this?
No.
Lots of head shaking.
Okay.
Oh, hold on. We might be getting an answer here. Dean's coming to join us.
So as far as the split on the money, there is no set split. I think that since this would be considered recreation, most likely, if we were going to, if the committee was going to not fund the dog park, I suspect probably some more money would have gone into the 53 River Street project, which is also recreation. And there's a possibility that a little bit more money would have gone into the open space set aside. But, you know, we didn't really have that conversation. It wasn't an either or, but that's kind of my sense.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay, I guess it's time to take a vote then. Yeah. You have to turn the microphone.
All right. Greg?
Yes.
Christine?
Nay.
Chrissy?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain. Steve?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
Jason?
Nay.
Adam?
Aye.
So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the motion carries.
Thank you. All right, next up, we're going to go through the remaining town meeting articles. I'm sorry, to be clear for everyone who's waiting, the Finance Committee has recommended that portion of the CPC warrant article. All right, first up is the budget transfer. We are going to continue deferring that. We will meet before the first night of town meeting, unless we know a number. Do we?
So Article 3, which is the transfer of free cash in fiscal year '24 for the funding of health insurance, is that we are closer, obviously, as every day and week goes by, to the end of the fiscal year. At this point is the town manager, along with the finance team, is, the goal is for a 1% or less turn back, but also is that we do need to ensure that any fundings, unforeseen fundings, costs that come our way over the next few weeks, example, a breakdown of a vehicle, that we do have the money in '24. So more on the transfer of free cash for Article 3 to come.
Okay, so we will plan on meeting immediately before town meeting. I presume a half hour unless something else comes up that we need to have more time to talk about. So that will be, continue to be deferred. Next up is the town capital infrastructure design and construction borrowing. This is you, Christine.
Is it?
Yeah.
I read your list wrong. I thought I was I thought I had the dog park, honestly, which made it exciting when it was already taken care of.
I have the most recent
I have the warrant.
warrant.
I can read it.
Please do.
That's right, yeah, no, I've got it on, from the website. 19, see if the money will, town will raise and appropriate from available funds or borrow all of the things related to incidental costs to take any action for the DPW facility improvements fueling station replacement of 2.6 million, replacement of the 2009 aerial ladder truck for 2.1 million, complete streets, Prospect intersection, Great Road sidewalks, 1.2 million, and stormwater infrastructure improvements, bridges, culverts, 800,000. The good news is the town manager came to a meeting recently and had a thorough conversation with us about these initiatives. So I don't have anything to add because I read the list wrong. Other than that, I move we approve these.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Dave?
You know, I appreciate the town manager stepped through the fueling station replacement a couple times over the past couple months, and, you know, I think he's given us all the information that he can give us on this. I don't know where I really kind of fall with this one. You know, the article states, and he stated, that the existing tanks are close to the end of their useful life. You know, we've pushed back a little bit on the town going all electric with their vehicle fleet. This article says this fuel depot will be needed for at least the next 20 years. And then it says this will accommodate the anticipated location for the new DPW facility. To me, I know that we would discuss that separately, but it does seem to, you know, grease the skids a little bit on, I think, that sort of initiative, that the capital plan as it's laid out now is, you know, 15 million a couple of years down the road for a new DPW building. I don't know where I've fallen on this, and I know this could just be a standalone thing if the town or finance committee or town meeting decides not to vote for a new DPW building. So I appreciate that. I don't necessarily like that it does gray that sort of argument a little bit, and it's more of stepping into that sort of issue. So my question is really more for the committee. I'd like to just get other people's thoughts on this particular issue before voting.
So the way I read that is more that this is being done in a way that allows the DPW to happen. It's not going to duplicate effort. We're not going to move it to this place and then do the DPW and find out that it needs to move.
No, I understand that, and I think that's fair at how it is stated and how it would be designed, et cetera. And it could be its own standalone, independent of whether a new DPW in some form or another moves forward or not. I think that's all fair. Like I said, I'm just being a little bit of devil's advocate of reading this as, you know, as sort of a stair step into that. Maybe I'm being a little extra sensitive because the dollar price for that building is going to be much larger down the road, and as you just articulated, like we're having debates about $100,000 dog parks, much less a $40 to $50 to $60 million building to hold, you know, the public works equipment. So I don't want to have that discussion now. I'm just open to whatever the committee is thinking, each individual member.
Hold on, Steve, Roland gets to go.
So on the tank replacement, you know, the fuel depot, they're in the ground now, right? They come up to the end of their useful life. And things that are in the ground, obviously the soil gets wet. We've had tons of rain in the last couple of years. Things rot, things rust. If one of those tanks let go, 2.6 million is going to seem like a bargain, because it's going to become a Superfund site, let alone all the fuel that was poured in there. It's going to be now in the ground. It's going to be useless to nobody because you can't use it. You got to get it rectified. You have Clean Harbors in there for not for a day. They're going to be in there for a long time remediating that. And if it gets into groundwater from there, you get a whole nother ballpark and a whole nother ball game that you're going to be dealing with. So my opinion is replace it. They're going to go above ground. They're going to be able to better monitor them. They're going to be contained. They're going to have containment systems around them. So if they did leak, that would be contained. It wouldn't go into the ground. It wouldn't have an environmental, have a cleanup impact, but you're not going to have an environmental catastrophe. And so that's my replacement on that. The aerial truck, you know, as he said, 3 years out. We order it now, it's 3 years wait. Maybe we get a little faster, maybe we don't. The longer we wait, so basically what you're doing is you're locking in today's dollar for something you get in 3 years down the road. So, you know, in 3 years we know prices are going to be higher than 2.1. You're going to be at 2.2, 2.3 maybe. So it's something to consider. The other ones, sidewalks, I think are important. I just question sometimes where they're built, because I do see people walking on Newtown Road, cars are going by at 40 miles an hour, and people are walking in the road. And obviously stormwater infrastructure improvements, as I've seen with all the rain. You just see what happened in Dubai recently, where they shut the airport down. and cars were underwater, the whole city was underwater. Now they're in a desert, I get that, which you would think the groundwater would be soaked up. We've had a ton of rain lately. And if we keep getting more, you know, if you go by Ice House Pond, you can see it's almost at the road level. I mean, it's high. So I think these are projects that have to be done. And I think it's a good, we should do it.
No, Steve gets to go next.
I was just going to say my 2 cents is, no, I don't think we're paving the way for a DPW building necessarily. This has to be done. It's reached the end of its life. You can say that about the DPW facility as a whole, but I don't believe we have a choice except moving on this one as soon as possible. Whereas the other one, yeah, with inflation, we could be up to $60 million by now. And I think that one's going to have to wait a while. So, no, I don't see it. I don't see it as paving the way.
Adam?
Can we slide yours down, just so this will reach? Thank you. No, that's fine. Yes, I just wanted to comment on the fuel depot since Roland was our liaison to the DPW committee, and I went as a surrogate liaison because I was passionate about the project. And I think it was Roland and I that suggested that we separate the fuel depot from the DPW project so that in the event that the DPW project failed, we'd still get the fuel depot done. There were 2 priorities that were identified that needed to be done more importantly than the DPW. One was the fuel depot and the other one was just perimeter safety features for the entire facility. So, yeah, so that's why we're discussing it now. And yeah, by moving it, it makes the future DPW project easier in terms of logistics, but I don't necessarily feel like it's going to grease the skids, as you were. I think that building project is just going to have to stand or fail on its own, and that's why the fuel depot was separated from it.
Yeah, I guess I would also sort of counter the argument and say that any crisis point that requires faster action that we solve possibly even moves the DPW down the road, right? If the fuel depot is about to go and they're like, well, we have to do the whole project. If we solve the fuel depot, maybe we can, push things off a little more. But I would also extend, since you brought up that we're electrifying the fleet, that the school buses are not going to be electrified anytime soon and that they use the fuel depot as well. This is in partnership with the schools. So that's it.
You're all making a very persuasive argument. Thank you.
I actually don't have anything to add to this conversation. This is one where the new guy is listening intently because I'm learning about all of this stuff from you. So I also thank you for your information.
Anything to add, Jason?
I agree with everything that's been said. I do not want to hear in a couple of years, we've already done this, it's already part of the larger project, we might as well keep on going. The statement of it, the DPW building has to stand or fail on its own is paramount, and I definitely don't want to hear that we've already been standing in this checkout line for a while, we might as well stay. So we want to make sure that's loud and clear. I think it's been said by multiple people.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote then.
This is Article which? Is that on the list in front of me?
Yes. 6, Town Capital Infrastructure Design and Construction Borrowing.
All right, so let's
You
go.
have to-
To turn on my microphone? Greg?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
I'm a yes, or aye. Steve?
Aye.
Dave? Aye. Roland?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, Greg, we're up to your Vehicle sales and rental overlay district.
Okay, so
10.
this article has developed a long way since when I first saw the presentation at the select board meeting. And that initial presentation had two concepts, one of which would have prohibited auto dealerships being added along Route 2A. And the second one, which is a much more moderate compromise, is the one before us. I did the due diligence on this and went and talked to some of the auto dealers on 2A. They are not concerned about this because basically they're grandfathered in. And one of the general manager at the Acton Chevrolet that I talked to on this issue basically admitted that what they're all looking at is the new development up in Nagog and how that is likely to impact their business as well as the town of Acton in the coming years. He said there is a potential, and again, you can't predict the future, but this is what they're watching out for, of 2A becoming a mini auto mile where there may be efforts to turn 2A into what Norwood is now, where you've got a lot of auto dealerships up and down the street that people can go shopping by visiting one after the other. He said, obviously, that creates a traffic problem. And so, interestingly enough, even from people who are in the business, the fact that the select board would be able to deal with these on a hearing and could add the kind of conditions that got added at Nagog to make that development less monolithic and more in fitting with the community seems like a prudent step. So with all that in mind, we discussed this at the Economic Development Committee, and the committee supports it. And as their liaison, I'll report that to you. They've also taken votes for and against a couple other articles that I'll mention at the time. But I also personally support this, so I urge this Finance Committee to support this article.
Would you like to make a motion?
So moved.
No. It has to be a motion to recommend, not recommend. No action, I think is an option, or defer? Recommendation. No recommendation, or defer.
Pardon?
You have to move to recommend.
I move to recommend.
There you go. Do we have a second? Second. You got that, Scott? I'm catching up. No, I'm sorry, this is the hardest part. Right.
I had one when I was sick last week.
Option number 1.
No, Jason, go ahead. I'm sorry, it's time for discussion.
Just-
Jason.
I just say, of course, the people who already have the business would love to put in barriers to somebody else to come in. That's the whole purpose of being first one through the door. That's anti-capitalist. So it's anti-competition. I believe, of course, they want to block other people from coming in. That increases their monopoly or near monopoly on the area. I don't see how an economic development committee can be for cutting back on the ability of businesses to move into town. I don't understand this than this being NIMBY. So I will be voting against this both here and at town meeting.
Greg, do you want to fill in on that?
Sure. If the only person I had talked to was Acton Chevrolet, I guess maybe I left the misimpression. I talked to many people, but it included the business community. And the citizens, by the way, and the survey that was done of over 600 citizens in Acton basically indicated that the public wanted this. I checked the survey methodology, and it was representative of the entire town, not just people in and around Nagog. So from that point of view, I think it reflects what the community is looking for. And this is the most moderate proposal. And without at least some select board ability to review a proposal, we could find ourselves not with economic development, yeehaw, y'all come in, whatever, but economic development that would actually provide us with the tax base that we're looking for. You'll hear that in the next couple of recommendations that we have. And this seemed like a modest, moderate approach to encouraging businesses of many sorts to locate up and down 2A, in addition to the auto dealers. And by the by, the only thing that the current auto dealers were mostly concerned about was signage. They have no idea what the new business is going to do in terms of signs and whether or not their signs will be sufficient. And to me, that's, boy, I remember in the old days, 40 some odd years ago, we had a sign bylaw in Acton. Now, we don't have that anymore. Do we?
We still do.
Oh, good.
We still do.
Okay. Well, guess what? You need a permit for it, don't you? So, to me, this is just in keeping with what we've been doing in this community for a long time.
Anyone else? Okay, let's take a vote.
All right.
This was a motion to recommend.
A motion to recommend Article 10, vehicle sales rental, as described. Greg?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
I'm going to say no. Steve?
Aye.
Dave? Roland?
Aye.
Jason?
Nay.
Adam?
Aye.
Motion carries to approve Article 10.
Thank you. Next up is Article 11, amend zoning bylaw and map for the Assabet River Overlay District and Powder Mill Zoning District. Greg, this is also you.
Yeah, this is a project that both Acton and the town of Maynard have been working on collaboratively to make sure that the development down near where the current Stop and Shop is also basically is synchronized between Acton and Maynard such that we can protect the water, particularly along the Assabet River, but also to continue encouraging development. So it is an overlay district. And the hearings have been held. The Economic Development Committee thinks that this is good for economic development. It also basically protects a water source and is coordinated with another community and has been in the works for about 2 years. So I recommend we support this article.
Could you please remind me how an overlay district works?
Interestingly enough, there are already regulations in place. What an overlay district does is basically say on top of all the existing protections that we have in terms of, let's say floodplain and housing, zoning, things like that. What we're going to do here is basically add the same protection to auto dealerships that we are adding up along 2A. So if you need to change the purpose of your business, you need to get a permit.
I thought there was something about an overlay that was not, David, that was optional, that if you chose to work with the overlay or not?
So in overlay district, you get your choice of the original zoning or the overlay zoning, but you have to meet all the requirements of one or the other. You can't mix and match. So you can meet all the original zoning or all the overlay zoning. That's right, so there's two completely separate sets of rules. Someone who wants to build there gets choice A or choice B, but you can't mix and match the rules that are in, some from column A, some from column B.
Okay. So presume this is about, in part, about limiting vehicle.
It adds that, among other things.
That's one piece of the.
Oh, that's, okay, that's not for the overlay specifically, that's just part of the bylaw change?
That is actually in the baseline.
Okay.
It's a change to the baseline.
Oh, that makes
zoning.
more sense. I couldn't figure out why one would choose to comply with an overlay if you had the choice of not and having here.
Good.
Thank you very much. Yep, go ahead, Tara.
So it's my understanding that, Tara from Mass Ave, also, I believe that it would allow multifamily housing on top of the stores. It's my understanding that it's over 1,000 units would be allowed in these different districts, all told. I think I calculated, I went parcel by parcel, I don't have my numbers with me, like 1,200. 70, so, and it's 3 stories above the floor, the commercial on first floor, and then 3 stories of multifamily housing. So that effectively would mean it would be 75% of the, depending on if we had an impact study, we would know, because that's what cities and towns do. They would know before they change the zoning what the maximum revenue from residential versus commercial would be, but it's my estimate there'd be 75% since it's bottom floor and then 3 stories, so 4 parts, 3 parts residential. So please don't forget that when you decide, because it's not just about car dealers. There's a lot more to this. And when we talked about the costs of stormwater, lights, paving, sidewalks, the developer never gives you all that, okay? You find out later that all these cumulative costs are borne by the town. And so I think it's really important to understand what you're getting into when you add 1,000 more housing units on those parcels. Thank you so much. I hope that you do not vote to recommend this, at the very least. Have no recommendation, and look for the impact studies that I'll personally be producing before then. Thank you.
Did you want to make a motion, Greg?
I still move that we recommend this.
Do we have a second? Second. All right, discussion. Okay, let's go ahead with our vote.
You're up first, Greg.
Aye.
Christine.
Aye.
Christie.
Aye.
Aye. Steve.
Aye.
Dave.
Abstain.
Roland.
Aye.
Jason.
Nay.
Adam.
Aye.
The motion for the overlay district passes.
You could do check one to X. Sorry, I was just trying to streamline
Eventually.
the situation here. Thank you, everyone. Next up is the next article, which is one of Adam's. This is amend zoning bylaw and map, MBT overlay district.
Can we please talk about 11 and 12 at the same time? And then I'd
Certainly.
like to bring up 12 first and vote on it, and then come back to 11. How does that sound?
No, hold on, we just did.
Sorry, 12, 13?
12 and 13.
Sorry, my bad. So I think broadly for both of these zoning changes, what's important to note is that the town has spent 2+ years, multiple outreach meetings, multiple sort of public forums to identify positives and negatives in the zoning for requiring for the MBTA, but also the zoning for the South Acton Village. So let me now jump to the South Acton Village portion. So, you know, the town's done a fantastic job of identifying what are the negatives of that village, what would the people who live there and travel through there like to see. Generally, people want more foot traffic, people want more opportunities for businesses there, whether it be coffee shops for the railroad, what have you. And so this zoning district change seeks to address those and make it hopefully inviting for potential developers or new buyers there to develop in a way that fits within this infrastructure. It was pulled out separately to keep it away from the MBTA, and then the MBTA becomes an overlay on top of it. And I think that what was definitely identified with the South Acton Village is that failing one developer coming in and buying a whole bunch of property and developing a community like what happened in West Acton Village, it's going to be very difficult to address all the issues in the entire district. So this bylaw change seeks to try to achieve that, even if it has to happen one parcel at a time, and hopefully it will work. So obviously the biggest issue down there is parking. You can't have businesses without parking. So, but at any rate, let me make a motion to recommend Article 13, the South Acton Village zoning bylaw.
Okay, discussion.
If I may.
Certainly.
The Economic Development Committee discussed this article as well and recommends supporting it. Basically, they said that the zoning changes are intended to spur commercial development, investment in South Acton Village. By incentivizing commercial activity on the ground floor, the changes also provide more flexibility with regard to parking requirements and the collective use of parking facilities. So in the immediate short term, this is a good step. What the Economic Development Committee is also in the process of discussing is somewhere between now and next year, trying to get a longer-term economic development plan for the town so that instead of dealing with this sort of piece by piece as they come up, we have a consistent idea of if we let things happen as they do, we may continue to be 90% funded by homeowners and 10% by businesses for the foreseeable future. If we want to grow the percentage of the tax base that goes to commercial, it would be great to have an overview of that. But since we're not going to get there until maybe a year from now, this is a good step in that direction.
Christine?
I think that this is a well-investigated and thought-out plan. It was possibly originally spurred by, you know, the state's requirements. On that note, I'm not willing to walk away from or risk walking away from grant funding from the state. And I think that this is, as Greg pointed out, there's a lot of upsides for development in that area, and we need more business availability if we're going to move the tax base.
Clarify, Adam, we're talking about South Acton Village. This is not required to pass for the MBTA zoning, correct?
That is correct.
So this is not,
I would still say that this is probably spurred by that other article, because we are focusing on this area as a whole due to being forced to look at it for the MBTA rezoning. So I think they're kind of hand in hand.
but I'm just saying, voting this one down does not affect grant funding in any way.
Sure. Okay.
Yes, correct?
Yes, correct. And the
Okay.
reason that the South Acton Village was pulled out as a separate article or separate zoning change was so, again, sort of like the depot versus the DPW facility, the South Acton Village zoning seeks to spur economic development and at the same time protect the historical heritage of that village before the MBTA overlay gets dropped in this similar area.
I watched a bunch of the planning meetings on this whole area of topics. One thing that I don't know if you know the answer to, but there apparently is a requirement that if you convert a house into multifamily, you need to live in it or some such. They're taking away the residency requirement.
I cannot remember off the top of my head where that discussion landed, and
Yeah, I was actually curious why.
I wouldn't surprise me if that is a requirement in the village, because that would spur what the various outreaches identified, was that people wanted more local homeowners living in the village, more pedestrian traffic, more of a village feel.
Okay. And I thought there was something about the parking. Parking is a big issue there. So in order to convert things to commercial, as they're hoping, especially with some of these, it sounded like you could do first floor commercial.
On some of the lots.
And I remember there being some picture where they took away some of the sidewalk or some such, or they changed.
I don't know
setback
that there would
requirement?
be sidewalk taken away.
Okay.
That was certainly one of the issues that we identified. It's remarkable to me when we did the walkarounds of that district, and I live in South Acton, how similar that street layout is to West Concord. And yet when you go into West Concord versus South Acton, the look and feel is completely different. Like they're not even similar, but they're really almost identical in terms of setback and all of that. The biggest issue is that the streets just aren't really wide enough to park and have a driving lane. And you can't pick up the buildings that are there and just force people to back them up. And so I think the hope with having businesses on some of the ground floor lots there and being able to park under some of the ground floor lots there would alleviate some of that. It's a tough district to make better, but I think the work that this committee put into it was about as thorough and thoughtful as you could get in terms of not lifting up buildings and backing them up off the street. And there's so much historic, buildings down there that they just can't be bulldozed, they can't be moved, they're important.
So I'm a little stuck. This feels kind of like the Kmart lot again, where, but we're doing it across a whole district. We just don't know what the effect on actual housing will be. Like a lot of the argument against Kmart was going to be when they try to get the zoning changed to mixed use. The idea was that you'd have ground floor commercial and then residential above. And we as a committee had a lot of concerns about how much additional strain there would be from introducing that much residential into the town. This would be spread out over more time. This isn't potentially one development that has a whole bunch of units. So there is a benefit from that. It could just be a natural part of the town growth. I don't know where that puts me, but I'm much less comfortable with that aspect of it, and that falls over to the MBTA zoning. But like I said, this one doesn't have any grant funding tied to it. So that said, there is no financial benefit to doing this particularly. Can you sway me?
Well, I think the only financial benefit would be if we can spur some commercial growth in that area. And this doesn't give any incentives. It doesn't go and ask commerce to come in and put in businesses. It just makes sure that the zoning is available for somebody who wants to put in a business if they would so choose. It also, but like I say, it also protects the village as it stands. There was a lot of care taken with building height, and the building height on the low end of say, like School Street versus the high side of School Street, and how, this, for view and zoning, or sorry, for view and height. I'm stumbling over my words here a little bit, but the takeaway is that it's very thoughtful planning, in my opinion, having been part of it. And as somebody who lives in that district, it's as good as, like I say, it's as good as you're going to be able to hopefully spur the right kind of growth without somebody coming in and just bulldozing and starting from scratch. To give people what they want, to give the community what
And
they
the
want.
right kind of growth is a mix of commercial and residential.
Yeah, it would be mixed use.
Because I can tell you, when I go through there, I have dreams about things you could put in, and there's just not the infrastructure.
Correct. So even though
None of
the
this seems like it's going to fix that.
reality is, even though the zoning is going to allow for it, somebody creative has to come in and actually do it. It's not going to make it
So
happen.
how is this not changing the zoning to increase multifamily housing?
I'd have to look at the details because it's been a while since I looked at this, but
I know it's been pulled out of the MBTA zoning, but it seems like it's effectively, it's giving by right divisions into multifamilies.
I don't want to speak out of hand and say the wrong thing, but my recollection is that it doesn't really change the existing multifamily that's already on those lots, I believe. I could be wrong.
1 second. So trade is prohibited. It says in the summary, it would also allow for multifamily housing with more than 4 units in one building by right, where a special permit is currently required.
Okay, sorry.
So
I
we are
did
looking
forget
at
that.
potentially, again, spread out over time, not one development, but potentially a significant increase in housing units.
Well, it's a question of how many lots does that affect? And so perhaps we should shelve this. Are we meeting again next week?
No, but we are meeting
Okay.
immediately before. We
So-
can certainly put it off until then if we want to get more information.
We could. And then identify specifically which lots and what the count is.
I mean, we'd be looking at, a worst case, this gets back to our discussion at the previous meeting about just what are the metrics and the costs that we think matter for growth. Can I get a sense of the committee on how much this information might actually change your vote? No, I can't get a sense, or?
Madam Chair, I refuse to give you a sense.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I refuse to give you a sense.
Okay. Roland, do you think your opinion is dependent on these
No, I think we need
scale?
I think we need to find out a little bit more information.
You want more information? That's what I'm
Yeah,
asking.
I think more information is better, than making a decision now and then saying, oh, we were wrong, or something like that. The more information we can have, the better we can be informed when we're making our recommendation.
Okay, Adam, do you?
Yeah, and so that will be my responsibility to come back. So let's make the specific questions. We want to know, versus current zoning, how many additional
Additional
units, okay? An actual count.
And can I
Yes.
have you ask another question as well, something that's just hanging out over my head? I didn't see it in the warrant, maybe I missed it. Is there any protection, is there anything keeping a developer from coming in, taking a property, building a storefront with 3 units above it, and then going, oh gee shucks, I couldn't find anyone to fill the storefront, but I got 3 paying tenants upstairs?
Good question.
Okay, Adam, the trick is going to be that we're doing this before town meeting, so you have to be as concise and informative.
What else would we like to know?
Are you specifically questioning Article 13?
Yes.
13.
Okay. And, okay.
My understanding is Article 13 does not involve open lots, open undeveloped lots. Or there are very few of them, being very different from the situation with the MBTA zoning where you don't know, like there's so much more of a question mark.
So let's add that to the question marks. How many open lots? How many vacant lots or empty lots?
Yes.
A couple months ago,
One of the things I was hoping for was a current, I think you already mentioned it, but what's the current bedroom count and what's the by right new bedroom count?
Tara, very quick.
Just the percentage of tax that would come from commercial versus residential, because effectively you're buying, by giving them the right to build multifamily housing on top of the businesses, you're buying you're subsidizing that commercial business. So if it's 75% in residential, then you're effectively losing money and paying for those shops, which might be empty. Also, the Acton Water District will want to know, because they wrote a letter of concern about that intersection and about the water infrastructure there. So you may want to hear from them before you decide to.
Where
Thank
could
you.
we find out?
I counted, I went parcel by parcel the other night, and I counted about 800 units, so subtract that from what exists. But I can show you that analysis if you like. I'll show you how to do it yourself if staff won't do it, but thank you. And by the way, same thing in Powder Mill. You just voted effectively to subsidize business with all of that housing, because you don't know how much the tax would be coming. So the goal, laudable goal, is to increase the percentage of commercial, but you just voted to recommend a proposal that would reduce the percentage of commercial. So thank you for listening, and thank you for, it looks like you're deciding to get more information, and I'd be happy to work with Adam. And Jason knows a lot about stuff like this, so hopefully we'll get more information. Thank you.
So we've got question mark additional units, question mark whether a new installed storefront would be able to sit vacant, which I'm assuming would be, and then how many empty lots affected, and then a potential bedroom count, current zoning versus changed zoning. Any other questions that you'd like me to bring back?
If you could find out more about the water district
Oh, yeah,
concerns.
the water district.
It's a tall order for a short period of time. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so we can just table that. We don't need to make a motion to table it
that's
until the
fine.
next
Yes.
meeting. Okay.
So Article 12, I think we're talking about, MBTA?
Article 12, the MBTA zoning law. So again, a zoning law whereby the town has really proactively put their best foot forward, multi-years of studies and discussions to do what they need to do to bring an article to town meeting that would allow the town to comply with the zoning law. So that at least from the town's perspective, we're not failing compliance and not complying. We have the opportunity to comply. But it really is up to the voters, right? That's what it's ultimately going to come down to. I suspect the only holes you could poke in this zoning article is that we've maybe over-complied by a little bit versus what the minimum requirement is. There are surrounding issues that aren't specific to this passing or not passing that I think are worthy topics to discuss. I think certainly myself and other people I've spoken to really feel like we're being extorted. We all know that this is the state trying to help the city of Boston move their population density issues out into the rural areas. I've also spoken to people who live down in the Boston area. They love this MBTA housing law because they would love to alleviate some of the congestion that they have down there. So those are sort of the spurious topics that that surround this. And then the other topic that surrounds this that concerns me is, and I think Jason has brought this up on numerous occasions, I think this is just the beginning. What are they going to come back with next? And personally, I just find it difficult that the state is sort of extorting the towns into this by saying, do it or else we're going to punish you. In my opinion, that's the definition of duress. Where's the carrot, right? What are they giving us instead? They want us to take all of their urban growth, but they're not giving us anything for it. And what's next? Once we comply with this, what are they going to come with next? Those are the sort of extra questions that are on my mind. With regard to this particular article, it's difficult for me to say whether we should recommend it, whether we shouldn't recommend it, or whether we should make no recommendation. It has been thrown out in public meeting that perhaps we should put it off until closer to the actual deadline, which is the end of this year, and maybe have a special town meeting in the fall. When we have kicked the can down the road and seen what's going on with the other towns that are fighting it, to see whether or not we have a leg to stand on to fight it. I'm really on the fence on this one about what to recommend. I'm happy to take discussion.
Greg?
Yeah, it's ironic that this is being presented as we're being forced by the state to do this. The original law was proposed by then Governor, the Republican governor, Charlie Baker. It was a bipartisan vote. The issue, as I understand it, is to address something that I think all of us see and hear, which is housing affordability. We have not, as a state, provided enough new construction, and the dearth of properties that are available, basically in a supply-demand curve, have become a situation where the average home is now what, $900,000? I've talked to town employees here in Acton who can't afford to live here. Now, I don't know that this proposal is going to solve all that in one fell swoop. It probably won't. But what I do know is that there is a long-standing concept of the tragedy of the commons. If we let every town try to solve a state housing shortage, it's not going to get solved. And what the previous governor and the legislature came up with was an attempt to do that. Now, that's the background. There's also then what we're going to call the specifics. Yeah, but what about this particular proposal here in our town? So I understand there are huge forces back and forth. There's a lot of context to this one. My guess is we're not going to be able to focus on the narrow issue of let's look at this article. We're going to probably get caught up into the broader subjects. But I guess I want to try to maintain some balance of but this is somebody's good effort, and it seemed to be a bipartisan good effort at the time to tackle a big problem that hasn't been solved in decades.
Christie, I just want to say how much I appreciate Greg's comments, because I'm a negative Nancy, and I'm thinking about the negative aspects of this, how I hear from people who talk about the negative aspects of this. But there are positive aspects of it too, which Greg has pointed out.
I'm going to step in there and point out that we are supposed to be voting based on the financial impact and our financial guidance to the town, not the
socio-economic,
all the other things that we are thinking about in our heads. But that's for our personal votes, not what we're doing here. Jason.
Okay, a couple of things to address your direct statement about this being financial. We don't know costs of this. That's part of the problem. We're going to have 1,600 by right new residences. Well, we have not done the work to know what the cost is going to be in police, fire, water, and school children. The five metrics, the perennial metrics that I mentioned in last week's speech. We've been given one side of the equation. We've been given the extortion number. It is absolutely statewide extortion. So we do not know the extent of the economic duress that can come from this state force issue. There's no reason to believe we'd be bringing up an article like this under any circumstances were it not for the MBTA law. 40B at least was statewide. MBTA is using a gimmick of saying because you've got public transportation, you're going to have to share or share of the burden of trying to alleviate what is indeed a statewide problem. If the purpose is to lower housing costs everywhere, that's kind of brutal. If the purpose is to have more housing, that's fine. It should be shared across every town in the Commonwealth. Furthermore, there should be some accounting for towns that already have a large a large percentage of multi-dwelling condominiums, et cetera. The things were not taken into account under 40B, and are not being taken into account under this as well. The unintended consequences of this are currently uncalculated, and I won't say they're uncalculatable, but they're certainly uncalculated. And approving this until we absolutely have to, until we are truly forced at the end of the legal gun, which is what we are under. We should be putting this off as long as possible and hope that one of the other towns that's got a large enough lawyer retainer to be able to fight it can fight it on our behalf. There is no other way to slice this other than extortion from this state. It's not even an unfunded mandate. It's because they're actively taking stuff away. And while we have done a good job of identifying just exactly how much that extortion is going to cost us in the prevailing grants that we've received over the last number of years, there's been no similar calculation to what the increased population is going to cost, independent of what it does to character of the town. Just straight up, what's it going to cost from water, sewer, fire, police, access in the schools. I realize we can't say no, but God, I hate this. And I hate being extorted, and I would love for us to push this to the last possible moment. And I really wish we weren't bringing it to town meeting at all.
Why can't we say
So
no?
I'll be voting no just because I can't stand being extorted.
Why can't we say no? You've just explained that.
If we say no, then we are going to have to direct. We are by definition directing the town manager to fight a legal battle with the state.
Or we say no due to lack of information that has been requested. There is, as you just very eloquently said, there is no concept of cost if this does pass, only cost if this doesn't pass.
I don't think and this is me conjecturing, and that's always a dangerous thing. I think if we vote this down at town meeting on laudable grounds of we want to know exactly how many extra beds we think this is going to be before we commit, and that's a perfectly laudable goal. My fear is that the Attorney General is not going to read it that way. They're going to say we are not in compliance, we have failed to do so, and we will immediately be in jeopardy of all of the punishments that the state is so readily doled out to Milton and towns.
I appreciate that there's some sentiment that this has been worked on for a long time. We do have the option of going to our select board and saying, we don't have the information we need to recommend this. Please provide more and make a fall town meeting.
Personally, I would love for the select board to pull this from this town meeting and wait until the last minute. They've done the work. If we're going to be forced into it, I guess we're going to be into it, but why, first of all, why put out 1,600 units when we were only on the hook for 1,380? I don't like that either. Yeah, I'm voting against it, but man, it's hard to fight authority, isn't it?
Steve?
Yeah, so I'm moved by all your Don Quixote-ish tilting at windmills. It's the state. They do this, all right? They have unfunded mandates all the time. This is a new wrinkle on it. They're not telling us to do something and not paying for us. They're telling us to do something, or they won't pay for something they give us now. So for those of you who are afraid of $100,000 for a dog park, we're talking maybe $2 million a year in grants in a time when we are strapped for cash. The other side of it is Do we know what will happen? We can conjecture, we can look at the worst-case scenarios if you want, but I'll give you one statistic. How many units will be required to be built if this passes? What will the state require us to do?
Zero.
Zero. So it's $2 million worth of zero as we know now. I agree. I don't know what's coming. I don't know what's coming next, but something may be. But I don't.
It's not zero.
Well, that is.
By law, it's not zero, but by right, it's huge.
Show me your numbers. Well, how many are
By right,
required? How many absolutely will be required by passing this? I'm not.
I agree with you that it's zero.
It's zero. Can we all agree it's zero?
Can we also all agree it will not actually be zero in 1 year or 2 years and 5 years?
Yeah, I will give you, it'll be greater than zero at some point. But I don't know what that point is, and I don't know what the answer is. I know what we'll lose, for sure.
So I'm going to.
So, I wasn't quite finished. I would be happy to see this booted to a special town meeting in the fall, because there's more answers we could get. But if we got to vote tonight, I'd say vote for it.
So, talking $2 million a year in grants, the water district meeting that I attended back in December, I think it was talking about if we hooked up to the MWRA, that was going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. And I haven't seen a good indication of the water district's view on this. Have you seen those? Last I understood, they didn't have numbers to know potential support on this. So I am concerned at that level. Also, given the EPA just said zero PFAS, which could push us in the other direction in that we do have these 0% loans covering our filtration system that I don't know what they're going to do about passing.
So the water district would have to follow state law in calculating the impact, and that's 110 gallons per bedroom. To Jason's point of a few weeks ago at a planning board meeting, can we get a bedroom count? Well, no, you can't get an exact bedroom count, because nothing is required to be built, but some things will be. So we can't get an accurate. We could do a probabilistic forecast of how many bedrooms might come out of it. You could calculate the water, but right now, there's not enough data to do that. So, like I said, I'm happy to agree to boot this to a special town meeting, but we don't call special town meetings, and we don't sue the state. So, if we're going to deal with it tonight, I'm voting for it.
Adam?
I have another thought on the comment of if we have to deal with this tonight, which is that we could vote tonight to recommend this. It could pass at town meeting. Towns fighting this could get a foothold and win. We could come back next year, or we could even hold a special town meeting in the fall with a new article to undo this zoning. We could always later on bring up a new article to erase this zoning if we felt we had a foot to stand on. The key feature is that it's really up to the townspeople whether or not they're going to vote on this. But you're right, our recommendation helps to sway or dissuade that.
Quick point of order, Tara?
Yeah, just the grandfather. Once you pass it, they have 7 years. So all they have to do is put a plan in on a napkin and they get it. So we're talking hundreds of units for one parcel up at Dover Heights. And I have my other comments. I have other answers for you and relative to the court cases too. And my recommendation, which will keep us out of court, I think.
Okay. Adam? The hard job falls to you.
This is tough. I cannot decide personally what I think is the financial best case scenario other than to make a motion to recommend it.
Oh,
Pardon?
if you haven't made that formally yet, I have an idea.
Please speak up.
Is it possible for us to stand up and say, we do not understand the financial implications of this? There are bad ones, and we just don't have the information to know the scope.
That would be called a no recommendation.
Yeah, and we have said that in the past, where we have
Okay.
made no recommendations because we don't have enough information to understand the financial impact, just for reference.
Yeah. I don't, it feels a little bit of a cop-out, but I don't feel like I have enough understanding. I appreciate that, from what Steve's saying, it might be impossible to have enough information.
It's difficult because there is a financial impact of it passing versus not passing. There is a financial impact of us meeting the deadline versus not meeting the deadline. And that's negative. That's an immediate negative impact. What is unknown is the long-term total impact in net present value, which is, that's a big number to drive a bus through, the high and low end of that. I mean, right off the bat, it would take a long time for 1,600 units to change hands. But there is, in my opinion and other people's opinion, and people who were on the committee for this opinion, that there is a case where there's a number of lots that will be impacted by this, where the owners of those lots, the moment that this passes, if it passes, just won the lottery.
Unfortunately, winning the lottery doesn't mean they cash it in. Right, or fortunately, in some ways. Did you have a thought?
I don't know. I think it's fair to make no recommendation simply as an act of, we know our hands forced, but that doesn't mean we have to sign off on it. I don't know that I'm totally against the rezoning, but I also am worried about the long-term financial implications. I'm reading, about many, many communities that have no idea how they're going to afford the infrastructure that goes along with this. It's an unfunded mandate. It's a multi-million-dollar unfunded mandate potentially.
To that a little, they do not need, if there isn't sewer capacity, we don't need to up the sewer.
And water?
I did not hear that about water. I presume we have to connect people to water, or else let them put in wells, which cause other problems.
You know, that's a good valid question, which is, just because it's zoned by right doesn't mean that you can necessarily get the project finished if there's no water to hook up to, but I don't know the ins and outs of how that would work.
Yeah, it's possible our
That's
select
a-
board member might know.
Yeah. David, would you?
The zoning does not require us to provide sewer service, doesn't require the water district to provide water service, doesn't require the conscom to, pass, approve of any wetlands boundary issues. It doesn't require any permitting or anything. All that is still required. And so the water district may not. I will point out, though, that in the past decade, our population has gone up by 6%. Our water use has gone down by 16%. So if we take that, we should add another 6% and lose another 16%. Now, obviously, that's not the conclusion, but it's not obvious that we run out of water.
All right, so then it's just the general infrastructure cost of a town expanding, potentially population, schools, fire, police, all of that. And I'm not terribly worried about that. So honestly, if that's the case, I lean more towards recommend.
You have 30 seconds.
So first of all, the water district has to provide the water if they have it. So they can't say no, so it can be all used up, and then when you want to put an addition on, then there's no more water. But what I was going to say is that there is a case that's going to be decided in May on whether the state actually has home rule authority to, is constitutionally allowed to do this. So I was going to suggest that you do no recommendation, send a memo to the select board, ask them to put it off to the fall so we know what that case says in May. Because once you put the zoning in, again, they file immediately, as soon as the ink is dry. There's also a question about this supermajority versus majority, simple majority, and there may be a case against Acton relative to it can't be a simple majority. So there's a lot of problems with this, and I liked your idea of putting it off to the fall and the millions a year for grant, how many of these grant dollars have we gotten that actually haven't cost us $2 or $3 per grant dollar? So please be careful about assuming that the grants are just free money. Thank you.
Adam?
Based on the discussion, I would make a motion to make no recommendation at this point.
Do we have a
on
second?
Article 13, or 12.
Second.
12.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, we're going to vote on no recommendation. Scott, please guide us.
Greg,
Aye.
Christine,
Aye.
Christie,
Aye.
aye for myself. Steve,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Roland,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Adam.
Aye.
Motion to
Make no recommendation.
to make no recommendation passes.
Okay, and we've deferred.
Madam Chair, may I make a completely different motion?
Certainly.
I move that the chair of the Finance Committee be directed to send a letter to the Select Board asking them to pull this from consideration at the annual meeting.
Do we have a second? Second. Discussion.
It's a $20,000 meeting.
Adam?
It's a multi-million-dollar decision.
This is probably worth a $20,000 meeting. And it might be worth waiting till some other towns get through some litigation.
Anyone else? Okay, hold on, Scott's writing. You ready, Scott?
Right as I've ever been. Greg,
No.
Christine,
No.
Christie,
Aye.
I'm going to say yes or aye. Steve,
Aye.
Dave,
What did Dave say?
You abstained?
abstain.
Abstain.
Roland,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Adam.
I vote aye.
That motion passes.
Okay, so we are asking the Select Board to pull this article, Article 12, MBTA zoning, from the annual town meeting and for them to hold a fall town meeting in which we can discuss it with further information, including seeing how the litigation is going, and we should have a list of things we'd like to know.
Yes, please.
I realize I just voted aye,
Too bad.
but I just thought of the question, which is whether or not it's worth it to have this as an article for discussion to start to pre-educate the voting public on what the topics and issues are surrounding the ins and outs of this and what we do and don't know.
I believe once an article is brought forward, it needs to be voted on.
Yes.
Okay,
So.
Thank you.
It would be an up or down vote. It wouldn't be educational.
thank you.
Ms. Chair, who seconded the recommendation?
Scott?
That's a very good question. I thought that was Greg that seconded.
I think it was Roland.
Yes, Rob.
I voted no.
Hey, that's a good reason. We're going with Roland.
Thank you.
Okay, so to back this up, this request, what questions would we like to have answers to?
Maybe the same questions that we just had for the previous one. What is the current bedroom count? What is the by right maximum? Knowing that, again, I stand behind what my speech last week, the maximum number is not necessarily a value, but we need to have it. I would like us to ask how many seats we have in the classrooms in school, in all of the schools combined, so that we can have some identity of when we're going to hit capacity and potentially have a building problem. Let's ask the water district to weigh in. Is this in a sewer district at all? I think part of it is, but not all of it, correct? So we're going to run out of sewer capacity at 10% of build out, 20% of build out. Where's the tripwire where we hit a major postal step function in having to build up our infrastructure?
Well, if we could ask Select Person, David Martin, to come up again. I have a question on sewer capacity.
Mr. Martin, would you please join us?
Hi.
So what is our current uncommitted sewer capacity at South Acton, and how much of this area is covered by the South Acton sewer plant?
It depends on whether Powder Mill Place actually gets built, right? With Powder Mill Place, we're close to the maximum, but if we're without Powder Mill Place, we have actually quite a bit of headroom. Powder Mill Place, we've been promised every year. Now this is the third year that it was, they were going to come back and build it, but it hasn't happened. Late last year, it was supposed to happen. They were going to come back last year. It didn't happen. Now we're a third of the way into this year. It hasn't happened. So it's your guess is as good as mine as to whether that would happen.
So the premise is if Powder Mill Place went forward, then we would have very limited ability to accommodate any further development in South Acton.
Yes, and a number of these parcels are not on the sewer anyway. And so, any project would require, a septic system or local, sewage treatment system, whatever the Board of Health requires.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more? Tara, no more. It is my vague recollection that if a property is in the sewer district and files the things to start being built, that it has by right access to the sewer, even if there isn't capacity for it. Am I just making that up in my head?
So if there really wasn't capacity, we would probably have to abate their betterments. That's just my guess, right? But an individual, like a single-family home, which is mostly the case in the existing sewer district, is hundreds of gallons a day. It's.
But that's not what we're talking about. I'm just imagining with the multifamily.
Oh, so if Powder Mill Place is built, then there's very little room for a multifamily. I mean, maybe I misunderstood your question. There's really not extra capacity for a multifamily development.
But they're still allowed to do it by right.
Yeah, but
no, okay, I'm sorry, now I understand. So if there was, for example, let's say 4 single-family houses on 4 acres, and that gets turned into a development with 10 units an acre or something, that requires a privilege fee, and the sewer commissioners can deny that. So if one of those 4 single-family houses, they can hook up by right, they've already paid their betterment. And even that's if we have capacity, all right? We cannot hold back capacity for somebody else, right? If we have capacity, we have to give it on a kind of a first-come, first-served basis. But where it wasn't bettered that way, that's a decision for the sewer commissioners.
Okay, so if someone has been paying their betterment, but their septic hasn't failed yet, the system hits capacity, you're saying that they get their money back effectively on their betterment?
So that's a court case, and I don't want to predict the court case. But again, in that case, there is so little for one house. It's so little. It's really unlikely that we would be within 300 gallons of the top, right? So.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, please.
Jason, can I make hopefully it's a friendly amendment to your request? Instead of going for the maximum number of bedrooms, based on what I heard at last week's special town meeting, a probable range is a more reasonable request. And my concern here is that once you come up with a number like a maximum, it gets weaponized, and it then becomes the boogeyman that eliminates rational discussion. So I would be more comfortable with a probable range because that is the reality we're likely to face.
I agree with you. As I said last week, calculating the maximum number is strictly a math exercise. The probable range is of significantly more probative value. The problem is who's going to be the one to be the arbiter of what a probable range would be. So yeah, go for it. Go for the probable range. I think realistically, if we take the 5 perennial limiters that I mentioned in the speech last week and find the tripwire on each of those major infrastructure topics, I think it will become much more illuminating as to what percentage of maximum possible becomes truly prohibitively expensive. So we can do it either way. We can either find the lowest common denominator tripwire of the 5 most common infrastructure issues, or you can come up with a probable range and then I almost said overlay, sorry. You can then take that probable range and compare it to the current capacity. Either way is fine with me.
Any thoughts? Could you send me that list of information or write up how you think what your questions would be on those topics?
Yep, I'll send you the last paragraph of the speech and the other questions that I want answered.
Okay, thank you. So I will send a letter to the select board. I believe that we voted and passed that. Okay. Meanwhile, we have our no recommendation for if they choose to continue with this article in the annual town meeting. Thank you. We are now down to authorizing the long-term lease for 19 and 21 Maple Street.
So the town manager was kind enough to explain some of the dynamics here. Essentially, the gist of this is when the town bought this property a couple of years ago, they weren't allowed to enter into a long-term lease, so it was a lease shorter than 3 years. And by passing this warrant article, it would allow this property to be used for a longer time frame, greater than 3 years. And the town has been soliciting, looking for tenants with these RFPs. And as you can see in the latest revision, they had 3 parties that were interested in the 21 and 19 Maple Street, and they reviewed those and would like to proceed forward with the Acton Food Pantry as a tenant on this property. A little really brief history is this lot is immediately adjacent to the train station in South Acton and was initially purchased for $1.1 million to provide parking optionality for commuters using the lot. Pre-pandemic, the lot and all the surrounding satellite lots were at capacity, and additional parking was in great demand, and that dynamic has changed pretty dramatically. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that the lot is about half the revenue it was sort of pre-pandemic, and so I think you can think that, you know, capacity is probably close to half of what it was pre-pandemic. I think on the surface, this is, you know, something that is obviously good to put this property to use and get a tenant in here. But, you know, a little bit of background is that $1.1 million to purchase this property was borrowed through the bond market at a rate that was like 4.25%. But the actual payment over the 20 years is $75,000 to $85,000 a year over the next 20 years to pay down that debt that was borrowed. This debt service is currently supported by the commuter rail lot, which is more than adequate to support the servicing of this debt. But by bringing a tenant longer term onto this property, those payments, those lease payments, would not go to service to service the debt. Now, I think it's a little bit of a philosophical point, but the issue is the town manager commented that the tenant that they're considering wouldn't have the ability to even make the debt payments as it was. Said another way, the lease would be below $80,000 a year or some amount of money on an annual basis. And so in any case, the parking lot would continue to subsidize the debt service. Long story short, if you read the article, I think the wording is very traditional for any of these sort of lease articles, and the terminology is on such terms and conditions as the select board may determine. You know, for all intents and purposes, the lot could be leased for free. Just from a technical perspective, I don't think we would have any way to oversee that or supervise that, as the warrant article would let the town manager and the select board to not to under any terms. It doesn't say the best economic terms. It doesn't say what's in the best interest of the town. It's just as to what the select board may determine. So that's my background on it. I don't want to make a motion just yet. I just would like to get the committee's sense of the idea that the town has debt outstanding of $1.1 million, which is paid by the commuter rail lot fund, again, more than adequate. I generally like the idea of the commuter rail lot supporting anything needed to the station or just building up for any additional enhancements to the station. This is independent of that. So I want to be clear that I'm not picking on anybody, food pantry or any other potential tenants, but they would obviously be independent completely of any sort of funds flowing there. So if this lease was approved, technically a tenant could pay nothing and live rent-free while the commuter rail lot subsidizes that debt payment. So would love to hear feedback from the committee. As I said, it's a little bit more of a philosophical issue. I was part of the South Acton train station committee and recall a lot of the issues and challenges with parking there over the years. Certainly appreciate the dynamics have changed. We don't have a crystal ball to look into the future. So for all intents and purposes, the fund, the commuter rail lot fees are just growing, and there's excess cash there that's to be used as the town sees fit, et cetera. So.
Anyone? Greg?
Yeah, this is another one of the articles that the Economic Development Committee supports. By the way, they do oppose one, so I don't want you to get the feeling that it was all yes, yes, yes. But we haven't gotten to that one yet. And they basically think that the space has potential to become a vibrant community asset, spur positive development in the area. In order to realize the potential, any lessee will need to make a substantial financial investment. No meaningful improvements will likely be made if there is only an option for a 3-year lease. Therefore, the Economic Development Committee urges a positive vote to enable this to go forward.
Anyone else? Dave, do we have any idea of whether putting the food pantry in or any other business will lose parking spaces?
No. I'm not privy to the RFPs or any part of that. If you're familiar with the layout, You're asking in an indirect way, probably an important question, which is what sort of improvements would be done to the property or capital investment required to get the property up and running for them to utilize it. I think John mentioned, the town manager mentioned that the back of the property is now used for an ambulance storage for a service that's in the area. So to answer your question, no, I don't know what changes would be required or proposed, or more importantly, who would pay for them. I think any approval to spend money on the property would be coming to us.
I was actually trying to ask whether this was going to cost us money by removing spaces that are available for community. My understanding is these were leased spaces. These were special reserved spaces.
I think that's correct. That was to be correct.
So I'm wondering if we're going to be losing revenue.
Oh, yeah, so they're unutilized now. I think people, I mean, there's a number of spaces in like the fire station and next to, across from Exchange Hall, which are in the church there, that are pretty wide open.
But these are specifically premium spaces. Presumably, some spaces will be needed for the food pantry. So are we giving up the revenue of the premium spaces in order to provide parking for the food pantry?
I guess simplistically, if that demand would return, yeah, for sure.
Hopefully within 10 years, this being a longer-term lease.
Yeah, so that's a fair point. And what the crystal ball is like, could we regret this 5 years from now? For sure, that could happen. I don't know, I can tell you about working from home and commuter habits and.
Steve?
Yeah, I was just wondering, what are we getting now for it? Are the spaces being used? Would this lease be incremental revenue, or would it be a loss?
I don't know. I mean, as I said, it's at terms that they could determine. Presumably, it would be greater than zero, so there's some benefit to allowing this to, I don't want to complicate it, but I mean, bring up the South Acton, village and development of South Acton. I don't know if this is appropriate to consider in the context of that. It's beyond the scope of this article for sure.
Roland?
So from my working perspective is a lot of companies are still staying hybrid, and that's their intentional goal for the future. Mine eventually is going to be going back 2 weeks a month. That's it. So that's where they stop. Once COVID hit, everybody's commuting, and then all of a sudden that just dried up overnight, right? Because nobody went into the office anymore. And they talk about that in downtown Boston with tons of vacant office space. And companies are like, my buddy's company, they just closed his office. You're fully remote. That's it. And a lot of companies are doing that because they find it cheaper to not have the employees go into the office because they're going to have to pay for office space. My wife's companies have their office space. So that's changed. Yeah, they were premium spots that you had to pay for, but there's also, if you're looking at that property from Maple Street, and you're looking at the train station, the property's in front of you, there's also a lot to the right. I went by there the other day, dropped off my wife on Friday, there was one car in there. And there's probably 20 spots, wide open. Train station was wide open. School Street, there wasn't any cars in it. So I think that's more typical than not these days. And if we go into a long-term lease, getting some kind of revenue for that instead of building not being, being vacant right now. Albeit the ambulance is a smaller building, it's a garage, but the building next to it, there's nothing in there. We have another asset that's not generating any income or being used for anything for the town. So I'm in favor of this article and going forward with it. It's for something like the food pantry, they need long-term stability for their service that they provide to the community, especially for those low-income families.
My concern is still, then what's the limit on the number of spots? If the lease says that they get the whole lot, then it makes no sense for the commuter rail to keep paying for it, and we're losing money on the system. This, for me, is partially down to we don't have the language, and I appreciate they're negotiating the lease, but I would love to have some understanding or a limit to how much of this can be handed over.
You may want to ask our select board
David,
representative.
any data for us?
So my guess is it's somewhere in between, but again, we haven't negotiated yet, and that's why, there are a lot of things to consider here. So right now, these spaces are really underutilized. They're basically not used. Part of that, I think, is this model now is no longer appropriate because even for people that are going into Boston, they typically don't go in 5 days a week. And why pay for a space when you're, for 5 days a week when you don't go in 5 days a week? So we're going to have to look at that, right, going forward to see how we can get maximum utilization. The main lot is approaching full on some weekdays, and so we may start to get spillover, and then we'll need to figure that out. So the food pantry or any tenant that we would get there would need some spots. How many, what percentage, we don't know yet. It's also the possibility that we would have more than one tenant, right? The ambulance service is currently a full paying tenant. And we don't know whether they would stay in addition to the food pantry or whether the food pantry would displace them. So there's a lot of work to do here.
Since it's a long-term lease and things are changing, you're saying specifically the lots are picking up. I know my husband's company now has people having to come in. It's a shift from fully remote back to at least part-time in the office. There are some changes. I presume the lease will involve a certain number of spots being available to them. And not comfortable personally with just recommending something that has no guidelines on it.
Well, it's a chicken and egg thing, right? So we can't, right now, we can't negotiate a long-term lease, right? And so we're asking town meeting for the permission to do that. If town meeting says no, we can only negotiate a short-term lease, right? So.
On the flip side of it, my recollection is that Mr. Mangiarotti told us that the lease was so low because anyone who goes in there will need to improve the property, and that the renter will be paying for those improvements.
I think that's right.
Okay, this sounds a little along the lines of the tax increment financing. Effectively, it's a lessee increment renting financing.
Except we're presuming that this all works out with the nonprofit, and if it does, it's a nonprofit, right? So it's also town property, and we're not selling it, and so no one will pay taxes on it.
In 10 years, if this all gets approved, is it simply back to the select board again to negotiate the next lease? Okay, thank you. Did you want to say something? Marion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So to Mr. Martin's point is that in your question of the premium spaces, so we have the flexibility of reserved spaces in relation to daily spaces. And at a recent select board meeting, knowing that the reserved spaces are the least used, to Mr. Wellinghoff's point, is that we are doing a pilot program where we have transferred 5 of the reserved spaces to daily spaces, anticipation to be able to bring in more revenue on a daily basis. So that, I think, helps solidify that point about your question about taking away from reserved premium. So if indeed it does come back, we have that flexibility to put it back the other way.
My concern is that when this lot was bought and when we made the recommendation to buy it, it was because it was going to pay for itself, specifically the parking there. And I don't want it to get to the point where the parking everywhere else is paying for this lot, which is entirely parking for something unrelated to commuter rail. So that's, for the select board, that would be my main concern. Did you want to make a motion?
No.
So we are currently deferred.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple challenging, and I think you're spot on with just sort of the optionality of 3 to 5 years from now. Where are we with this demand for the commuter rail lot? I mean, I'll just punch that button again. It was like the location is perfect. It's right there, and so it's also on the inbound side as opposed to everything else, which is on the outbound side. So if you have a reserved spot, like you would pay to come in a hurry, and boom, you're right there. But on the other hand, it's doing nothing now. So, and then, the debt is another sort of sticking point to me, for me. I don't know, this is big time. Madam Chair, as a representative of the Finance Committee, duly appointed to cover Article 14 to authorize long-term lease 1921 Maple Street. I make a motion that the Finance Committee recommend this article.
Second,
Thank you.
race.
All right, any more discussion? Okay, Scott, could you please take us through the vote?
Greg?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Christie?
Nay. Nay. I'm sorry, I didn't think I said the first one in the
I
microphone.
put you down for 2. Steve? Aye. I skipped myself, I can come back to myself. Dave?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Aye for myself, I guess. I'll go with the group. Sorry, the motion passes to recommend this Article 14 as, I'm not going to repeat everything Dave said.
Next up is the citizens petition gas-powered leaf blower phase-out. I would like to point out that we have in the past been very comfortable making no recommendation on citizens petitions. And I would argue that from my reading on this, it has an unclear at best economic impact, financial impact. Adam?
I would disagree with that statement and say this has a very specific and very high financial cost to the town.
Dave?
I'd agree.
Okay.
The Economic Development Committee recommends that we vote no on this. And if you want, I can give you the reasons.
If I can hold on for 1 second, I apologize to Christine. This is her article if she'd like to lead the discussion. You don't have to.
No, that's okay. I would like to hear what the committee has to say. So this is something that is being done in many surrounding communities. It is a phase-out. It is specific to the, the worst of the worst as far as the impact of the gas-powered leaf blowers, environmentally, noise, all of that jazz. I think that one of the financial impacts, and I don't know where Adam is going with his statement, and I look forward to it, is the impact on, the environment can't be discounted. As a owner of a very quiet, very odor-free electric leaf blower on a property that's, granted, half an acre or less, they're very effective and work fantastic, and they are not annoying. And they don't shovel greenhouse gases into the environment. But all that being said, that's not a monetary reason. So I'm very interested in the Economic Development Committee, and I'm very interested in what Adam has to say, and I want to hear what the committee says.
Adam?
I love the spirit of this article. I do. The timing is way too short. For homeowners that own their own equipment, like myself, that have literally invested thousands of dollars in very recent years in this kind of equipment, the timing is way too short. I will get nothing when I need to sell that. That's a direct financial impact. There is not an alternative electric product in the market for what I need for my lot, which is 0.97 acres, which means I don't even get to use any equipment because I'm, a couple tenths under that 1 acre. If and when the large enough power battery pack leaf blower becomes available on the market, it's going to cost me a freaking fortune because everybody's going to be out buying them at the same time. The thing about this article that kills me for the taxpayer is that this has to be enforced. Don't make rules that you're not willing to enforce. And it says right in the article that the police will enforce this. How many FTEs is that going to cost us? Because you can't hire police just for the time of year when you want to stop this from happening. So we're going to have to add, I would guess, at least 1, if not 2 to 3 FTE to the police department for all the people that are going to be calling on all the people that are going to be breaking this regulation. I think this has a financial impact on the taxpayers in the minimum of $100,000 a year to our bottom line.
Greg?
Yeah, the Economic Development Committee didn't look at the environmental issues because that's not part of their charter. But what they did do was look at the economic development issues, and they came up with 2 points. One, the town's current budget crisis requires a sharp focus on essential town and school department services, rather than adding more regulation that will require time, attention, and monetary resources to implement. So that's your point. So they agree with that. The second one, he said, trying to scroll down quickly, and it's not working. There we go. Is an interesting observation, which is the market is already moving towards the increased manufacture and sales of battery-powered lawn equipment, lawn mowers, as well as leaf blowers. And this article only deals with the leaf blower, but the market's moving that way. Home Depot has said that they expect about 85% of all the lawn equipment sales that they will make in 2028 to be battery-powered. But they also indicate that it's going to take them that long to deal with the battery issue, to get enough batteries available that people can purchase. In addition to talking to the Economic Development Committee, I spoke with some, quote, landscapers who are singled out, and they get phased in a year before residents do. Virtually all of them are small businesses. Virtually all of them are not prepared to make the same kind of trade-off you have to do as an individual homeowner, which is I've got to get rid of this stuff within the next year and make an investment in a whole set of new things. And the concern is you need enough batteries because, again, the infrastructure is not fully developed yet that you can basically drive in and use somebody's home to power what you're doing. And a concern about theft of the lithium batteries. Apparently, they are a hot item right now. So, ironically, we're probably going to get there anyway. And so why require it? It seems to be a burden that falls on small business people who are not in a position to take that on. That doesn't seem to be a particularly good economic development policy, on top of the fact that, yeah, we would have to pay to police it. So they're against it. And so am I.
Roland?
So kind of also to Greg's point is, then what's going to come next? We're going to do snow blowers and lawnmowers and everything else. I have a riding lawnmower, like if a friend gave me his fold one. But I looked at replace mine with electric, about $6,000. Not going to happen. So battery technology is still not there. I have an electric leaf blower, but mine plugs in. It's not quiet. I'm not going to get rid of it. The police can come and yell at me. Whatever. And thinking a little bit further out, what about the town? Town has leaf blowers that they use in the crews. How's this going to impact the town? We're going to go and buy all new leaf blowers for the cemetery and all these other ones as we keep making things more and more stringent. And they're not necessarily green, because you get a manufacturer's battery, you got to use lithium. Lithium has to be mined. So there is still an economic impact to the world, really. And and then you got to charge these things. Unless you have solar array on your house, or buying 100% Acton green, they're burning fossil fuels. So I'm not in favor of this article at all. I know somebody just said to me, because I just want to spend about $1,000 buying a leaf battery, backpack for his property. He's like, now I got to get rid of it. So I think you're telling your citizen, hey, well, yeah, great, let's just do this. We'll put this law in effect, and there's an economic impact to everybody in town too. So something you got to consider. So I'm not in favor of this.
Scott?
Haven't said much, but this one's really close to home for me. I have electric lawnmowers, and I have gas-powered leaf blower. And a good friend of mine owns a hardware store, and when I was buying equipment, he said, you can do the electric mower, but the electric leaf blower versus the commercial gas-powered one, they are not the same. And I would happily take my gas-powered leaf blower to anybody's house and compare it to an electric-powered one and see which one moves the leaves more. The issue with the electric lawnmower works for me, but I go through 5 batteries to mow my lawn. And I can't imagine running a business and using batteries to, you know, they would have to have mobile charging, which generates to, which would be run by gas, right? Like, I literally burn through 5 batteries, and I argue with my wife because if I don't cut the grass when it's low enough, I can't finish the lawn in a day. I have to charge the batteries, and I have to finish it the next day. So I think the battery charging is, and I have like the steel, like the same thing that these guys are going to be using, batteries, and they probably might use bigger ones, which would take longer to charge. I just think it would take, I think it would put a lot of expense on the small business, and I think the assumption that electric and gas is equal across the board is, I don't think that is accurate.
The select board was moving on this, and it was not moving fast enough, was my understanding, which is why it came forward as a citizen's petition. I personally am comfortable with the select board thinking through it further. Steve?
Well, I was just going to add the point that, you know, you talk about individuals having to buy new equipment or small businesses having to buy new equipment. Well, the small business side of it just passes on that to the customers. I live in a condominium that has 60 acres and 277 units. We have a landscaping contract. It takes them probably 10 or 15 guys, several days with blowers to do the fall cleanup. That's going to have to be passed through to the residents and condo fees. So it's not without its economic, it may not be taxation, but it's not without its economic consequences for the residents.
Adam?
I just wanted to put a point on that, which is that we're not talking about like a 20% increase in the cost of commercial landscaping. We're probably talking a 4-fold increase in the cost of landscaping for people who pay landscapers.
I was looking at, we have a riding lawnmower. I was looking at what it would cost to switch, and it was on sale for $5,000, the one they had. So it's, I don't think the market is there yet. It's, again, a little chicken and egg, though, that you need it. I just think the phase-in time is too short.
It's too short. That's the issue. I love the spirit of the article. It needs to be a 10-year plan, not a next year.
Jason, anything to add?
Just that I'm happy that I actually get to agree with the EDC for a change.
Yeah, you'll get to like them.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
Sure, but I'm happy to have somebody else recommend.
I recommend.
You recommend the article?
Yeah. Oh, no,
You
I recommend
recommend this?
defend, no.
Greg's fired.
Rookie mistake. I get at least one rookie mistake. Okay. I move we oppose.
Move to not recommend?
Move to not recommend, whatever it is.
Can we have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Greg,
Now, wait, if this is a move to oppose, then I move aye to oppose. Oh, man, okay, aye.
yes.
I'll abstain.
Christie?
Aye.
I am aye. Steve?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Roland?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Motion to not recommend passes.
All right. Steve, we're up to you. This is the bargaining agreements.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As of 5 o'clock tonight, I was informed there is no agreement in place. And can't rule out there might be one on the eve of town meeting, but at this time, there's no reason to change our position, which is deferred.
All right, thank you. That is,
Yes.
because
both.
it is not a change, I believe we do not need a motion. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct.
All right. Debrief on special town meeting. A debrief on the special town meeting. Anyone want anything? Adam needs a special town meeting? A debrief, yes. I believe that can be done another time if no one,
Yeah, I'd actually like to share other new information, but not, it's not on the special town meeting.
okay. We're going to go through the agenda and then hopefully part of a liaison report you can find put it into. Regarding public education, which is the next agenda item, I will be presenting our point of view to the select board at their April, not August, 29th meeting. I keep trying to make. Yes. Jason.
Same topic, there's a coffee at KJ's Cafe on Saturday, coffee with a select board member, and I'm going to try and show up as soon as I wake up after getting home from Oklahoma. So that's another outreach opportunity to let the public ask questions.
Any liaison reports? Nope. Oh, please go ahead.
So I would like to get this board's guidance because the Economic Development Committee, which I am your liaison to, has asked me to do some presenting at town meeting. And the question is, I haven't been active in town politics for a long time, and I wasn't sure if that's normal, weird, pro forma, whatever.
No, in the past, we've had a couple of members who are not only members of the EDC, but chairs of the EDC. So, no, there's no conflict in the roles. I would suggest you dress a little better if you're going to talk at town meeting.
Oh. Well, since we're talking about jackets and ties, what, you're going to make me go out and make a purchase? I may have to go buy an electric tie.
Jason would lend you a bow tie if that's your taste.
I just thought it would be nice to remind people that there's a town election, I guess, coming up on April 30th. Early vote often. And May 6th, I heard there's something at like 7:30.
Yes, we will be meeting at 6 PM. I'll get the room out to you unless we think we need more time than that for our discussions. That's before the town meeting that starts at 7.
Both nights?
No, 6, I hope just the first night.
Okay.
6 p.m.
First night will be 6 PM. Thank you.
Yes,
If you'll permit me to remind you that you need an agenda.
yes, that's why
I made that mistake once.
that is why I am confirming the time. I plan on submitting it as soon as possible. Okay. That is our next meeting, is the 6 PM meeting on May 6th. Do we have any other committee business? No? Okay, Greg, would you please make a motion for us?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Call a roll,
Hold on a second.
even though it's non-debatable.
Greg?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Christie?
Aye.
Aye. Steve?
Aye.
Dave?
Gone.
Absent.
Uh,
Roland?
Aye.
Jason?
I'm going to dinner. Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Say it real fast, go ahead.
Okay, brief correction. We are actually currently scheduled to have a tentative meeting on Thursday, May 2nd. We will have a meeting at 7:30 PM if the override fails on the 30th. In this room. Yes. Right. 7:30.